Let's dive in and talk to Gerard in Connecticut first. Gerard, you're live with Eric and Seth. What would you like to talk about?
Hi, how are you guys doing?
Very well. What's up?
Okay. So what I want to ask and talk about was this question: to what degree can we reasonably believe metaphysical claims? And by that, I mean claims that are perhaps like beyond the purview of science or empiricism and may in fact be unfalsifiable. Do you think that it can even ever be justified in believing those claims?
Well, how about you give us an example and we can move on from there?
Sure. So the example I had set up was my belief that there exists more to reality than what we can observe. I think that is, a good example of something that metaphysical, hard to prove if possible.
Well, it sounds so vague. I still don't understand what you're talking about.
Okay.
Like what? What is more to us than us? What's going on?
So, basically, what we can observe is everything we're kind of like related to, right? We can see electrons through, electron microscopes. We can see a lot of things with telescopes. We can basically interact with the world and sense them, and that's what we would call the observable reality. That could include theoretically like multiverses, things like that, according to certain scientific theories. But I would say that so for example, God would be a thing that you wouldn't observe, but would be outside of reality. Now, I don't particularly believe in God, but that's an example of something that would exist beyond observable reality. And
that sounds like a category error. You gave us a whole bunch of examples of things we can observe as examples of things we can't observe, and then you threw God in there. Do you get what I mean? I'm still not getting it.
So, okay. So, so basically where I come from is a standpoint of mathematical realism. Are you familiar with Max Tegmark?
The name doesn't sound familiar, Seth.
No, I'm not familiar.
Okay, so he's a mathematical realist, and I sort of agree with him on the point where the universe, I think we'd all agree that the universe is described by mathematics. All of our physical laws are written in mathematics. But we take it a step further to say it's not just described by mathematics, but the world is inherently mathematical. And that is to say that it's not that the universe comes first and we make mathematics to describe it, but that mathematics is what's there in priority, and the universe is just an example of something mathematical. And so if we imagine the universe as just one mathematical like object or construct, whatever term you like to use, it seems clear to me personally that it's not special in that regard, and there could be more out there.
Okay, I'd like to jump in, if I may. Mathematics is still essentially a scientific process, right? We know that mathematics works because it works, right? 2 + 2 does not equal 5. And you are still talking about concrete scientific processes to describe, to measure, to prove what is real and what is not. And then all of a sudden you make this sort of leap into, and I believe something exists beyond. And as James Randi so famously said, no amount of belief makes something a fact. You believe there might be something out there. That's not proof that something may be out there. That's an extraordinary claim, which requires extraordinary evidence. So I don't hold to the metaphysical. I don't think that claims of the metaphysical get exemption from requiring extraordinary evidence. So you can say, well, I think it may exist, or it might, or it could, but these are fantastic claims, often rooted in supernatural ideas, and they have to meet the same burden of proof as everything else. So is there any burden of proof that you think is met with the claims of metaphysics or metaphysical truth?
Well, in terms of my particular metaphysical claim, that
Which one? Pick one.
is-
Give me a specific claim so we can root ourselves in that.
that the universe is mathematical.
But that's not a metaphysical claim.
Tricky. It's not?
Now, if we're looking at measuring things about properties of the universe using mathematics, which is a scientific process, that's not a metaphysical claim.
I think I would disagree because so I think one thing I wanted to sort of touch on was kind of the difference between empiricism and rationalism? I think that, mathematics is in the domain of rationalism. We can think about mathematical things, rationally without having to empirically observe things. Obviously, we always observe first, but once we observe certain facts, we can analytically derive other facts. And so if we're talking about mathematics from an analytical perspective, then it seems to me that it's not necessarily based in empiricism, which means it would be more of a metaphysical claim than a scientific one.
Okay.
I know I said a lot of words there.
No worries. I want to try and break this down so everybody can follow through with this, okay? I want to give you my take on those things, and I want to see if we can follow through this together, okay? When you say that the universe is mathematical, I think that you're taking a tool, which is mathematics, and ascribing the entire universe as that tool. I think that if we switched that around, though, and said that you think that the universe can be described with mathematics, I think that is a noble pursuit, but also not entirely true. And so let's phrase this instead in philosophy, right? I do believe that mathematics is, the roots of mathematics are in philosophy, right? There are a lot of philosophical terms, therefore, addition, subtraction, multiplication, all of those things are found in philosophy, and the symbols therein are what we find in math, right? This is all put together. This is all, sections of the same pie here. This is where it comes from. And so when you're talking about, things breaking down empirically, I think that you may be committing a category error. So let's say we're talking about fiction, Lord of the Rings. Does the Lord of the Rings exist? Well, as a story, as a fiction, yes. And you can prove that empirically. The Shire is not an actual place. But it does exist as a fiction. And so I think that what you're having a problem with is you're starting to get to these muddy places in between where something existing as a fiction and something existing as a fact would preclude it from being empirically observable. I can hold up a book and say, this is a book, inside of this is fiction. This is like all of those things exist. We can see and observe those things. So I don't see where those are incompatible.
First of all, I don't think that the view that, math is just a tool, it's a description. I don't think that's, necessarily wrong. I think that's like a defensible belief. But the reason why I think, it's a little bit more than just the map is because when we look at how science has evolved over time, or not just science, but even philosophy, right? We look at the original atoms. They said that the atoms were just these little physical like points that made up basically everything else. We just kind of imagine them as like little material balls that constructed everything else. Then we got into a little bit deeper when we saw the atom was actually not just one ball, but it was broken up into more parts. And basically there's this abstraction that keeps getting more and more abstract. We go from the physical that we can see and touch and all that to all of a sudden we're dealing with, if we go all the way down, like what fields and, basically mathematical equations that that explain, our best picture of reality. And so what I would argue, again, it's hard for me because it's hard to argue against the idea that, math is just a tool. But I think if we look at, this trend of, Plato's cave, basically, we look behind the shadows, we see the shadows of reality, and then we peel back each layer. And what do we get? We kind of just get math at the end of it. That's honestly basically
I have no idea what your point is. Are you saying that science has had to evolve as the resources for discovery have evolved, and somehow there's an infinite regress where all of a sudden the real world breaks down into some kind of a metaphysical truth or a metaphysical reality? Is that what you're saying?
I'm basically saying it breaks down to math, I guess.
What breaks down to math?
And the basically reality. Now if we
hold on. Hold on. I really don't think you satisfactorily answered Seth's question there.
Yeah.
You said reality breaks down to math. Okay. So one Daffy Duck.
I'm trying to decide how long we wander in the weeds here. I see math is we can measure things mathematically. It's a process. I like the word tool that Eric used, but it sounds to me like you are leapfrogging from a specific tool into this sort of wild conjecture about what might be, what could be, sort of beyond the physical world. And those, again, are extraordinary claims. And again, they require extraordinary evidence. And you would have to measure those claims using the tools of science, whether that's math or some other kind of measuring tool. You would have to prove that it works. You would have to test and retest. But to make the claim itself, it's not even academic at this measure. There's a burden of proof that is simply not being met.
Yeah.
So this kind of goes back to my original question, how do we deal with these sort of metaphysical claims? Because like you were saying,
how do you deal with them? You say you fucking prove it.
Yeah.
That's how we deal with metaphysical claims.
Exactly. When evidence comes about,
use science.
Gerard, we take it and we evaluate the evidence. That's it. Right. You pointed to atomism and used that as an example. And that was the one that you could also maybe have pointed at. Look at other sophists. They were called sophists for a reason. So it was a thought that everything was constructed of fire. Everything is made of fire. No. The reason we got to where we are is because we didn't make those assumptions before we had the evidence. When you have the evidence, apply it. It's investigate it, study it, use the math that you love and learn about it, but don't jump to those conclusions first, or else that's sophistry.
I think if you are going to say, well, if we can't use scientific processes to measure this, and this, you've just validated, at least to a degree, validated every superstitious, supernatural, religious claim ever made, because woulda, coulda, shoulda. Right? They could be out there and you can't disprove them. They're unfalsifiable. That's not how we determine what is true. We say, if you're going to make the claim, I need you to demonstrate the claim. And the tool that we have, the reliable tool that we have, is science. And this notion as well that, there are a lot of things that we don't know. There's a lot of things we haven't observed. There's a ton that we don't know. I think that's a fair acknowledgement. There's a lot that we have yet to discover. There's some stuff we're probably wrong about. But the tool for discovery and correcting the information that we got wrong is still the scientific process. That is our true north. It's the cornerstone of how we determine what's real and what's not. So I don't give metaphysical claims any kind of pass. I think bring it. If you're going to claim it, you're going to have to demonstrate it. Otherwise, it fails the burden of proof.
Yeah. So, but thank you for calling in, man. I definitely suggest that you look into why Pythagoras had a cult. Because I think that you may have a lot in common with the reasoning, and I think that might help point you into why that's not really a good place to go. But
so can I ask you one last thing before you let me go?
Sure. What's up?
So I just want to try to. I know you kind of did, but I want to bring it back to the very beginning.
No, if it's continuing the conversation, we're going to leave everyone in suspense for the next time you call in.
Okay.
All right. Take care, man.
I didn't mean to pop on that guy. It just,
Seth, that's okay. That was beautiful.
I'm at a moment in my life, and I come out of religion, and I come out of God belief and belief in ghosts and demons and all that stuff, and I really do have empathy and compassion for people who are navigating this. I just think, how in the world do you get to a point when you have to play this wild game of existential metaphysical twister? It makes no sense to me. Well, if you were to go down to the atomic level and you were to then regress the atom back to this and that, what? Well, and after a while, I just look around and I think, what the fuck? What are we talking about? Yeah, and I don't mind questions in the academic sense, if we're talking, but some of this is just semantics. I mean, no, I'm sorry, not semantics. It's just an academic exercise, but often it's a waste of time. You are making an unfalsifiable claim not rooted in the evidence, and I just tend to sort of shake my head. So my apologies for cutting you off,
dude. You cut me off anytime you want to. You had a really
all right. Sorry, I'll be a good boy.
You were fine, man. You were fine.
All right.
Really, ultimately, what I started to get locked into is it felt like it was creating this space where the supernatural can live, and I think you called that out very, very well. So we're solid. And plus, yeah, the live chat loved that. So
well, I'm here all night. Try the veal. Thanks for coming. All right.
Well, let's. Actually, you know what? There was something something else that we were going to do, and that is that we had a Christian call in with a prophecy, who had a prediction about 2 months ago, I believe, and we've had other people call in and give predictions. We had one person who I believe was into voodoo call in, and I asked them if they could make my hair and teeth fall out. And that didn't happen. Still mine. But we had somebody else, and we actually have the clip. Can we show the clip? Because I think it's time we hold these people's feet to the fire.
I would like to give a prophetic word that God has given me.
Oh.
And you guys can save it. And then when it happens, you can see that it was a word from God. God showed me in a dream that Russian soldiers were commanding Chinese soldiers to go into people's houses in Washington, D.C. and kill a bunch of people. And they was all wearing UN hats, and Trump was nowhere to be found. And
okay.
Well, I hope that last part's true, at least.
Let me finish.
There's more?
Come through the clouds, and he slammed on the calendar, and it said November 2020. So this will happen in November, and I will call back on November, and when everything I said nail to nail is true, then you guys will have your proof that God exists.
So Seth, have you gotten your UN hat yet?
I'm looking out my door, waiting for the black sunglasses. I'm waiting for the van to show up. I mean, filled with armed troopers to escort me into the apocalypse. By the way, do you think that guy was real? You think he was legit, or you think he was just yanking our chain?
No, I think he was legit.
I'm amazed at the prophets. I released a video, and I'm about to release a podcast where we get into a lot of these people who have been prophesying the Trump victory right?
Mhm.
And they were talking about God's man, God's chosen one. By the way, anyone who is not Trump or in opposition to Trump is in league with Lucifer. They are all demonic. Of course, they're speaking in religious, very apocalyptic language. And of course, Trump then loses the election. Their predictions, their prophecies do not come true. And I think this is a referendum on God belief or these specific prophets at the very least. Because
Agreed.
either God was not powerful enough to fulfill the prophecy, or God does not exist, or they are false prophets to begin with, right? Meaning that they were prophesying something that their God never promised. I mean, there's no scenario where God wins. I think this is a wonderful opportunity for us to invalidate those who failed, who gave a false prophecy, something that did not come true or happen. And
Mhm.
I'm amazed and aghast that people aren't leaving those congregations
In
and their
droves.
roles and their tithe, their tithing lists and everything else, that they're not leaving by the thousands and saying this is a bunch of crap.
Agreed.
I think it's a referendum on the validity of the prophets and their prophecies. So
Agreed. I actually just about a week ago helped my roommate put together a full compilation of prophecies just like that on Holy Kool-Aid's channel. So if you haven't checked that out yet, Seth, check out Holy Kool-Aid's channel, because we put together this whole video that is just Christian prophecies about the election. It
I
was
always
pretty
think
good.
about the end of the world prophecies. Eric, I wrote about this in Sacred Cows, but I mean, for every generation that's been alive, there have been prophets of doom, and they're like, there's too much debauchery in the world. We've gotten too evil. God has withdrawn his hand of protection. These are the end of days. Jesus will return before I die. And then all of the people who made that prediction die. And this has been going on and
Mhm.
on, and it's been going on for thousands of years. I am amazed that people are so uncritical when these prophets fail that they don't stand up, point a finger, and say, "What's wrong with you? You misled me." And then they pack up their stuff, and they take their tithe money, and they go elsewhere. But they don't. They continue to remain allegiant to these
Mhm.
sort of scam evangelist cult leaders, and it's maddening to watch.
It is. It is. But that's why we're here, man.
Yeah.
That's why we're here.